Good morning, good evening to you wherever you're tuning in around the world for this latest Reuters event supply chain webinar. My name is Nick and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Today's topic is a subject of ever increasing importance, sustainability. Specifically, today we'll be talking about sustainable practices within logistics. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce each of the panelists, starting off with Keith. Keith, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. So pleased to be with you today. My name is Keith Woods. I'm currently a Global Supply Chain Director at Coca-Cola. Been there about 11 years, 14 years if you count the time I worked my way through school, and have spent time in various parts of our supply chain. And pleased to be with you today to talk about this very important subject, not only to our company, but to our communities at large.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us today, Keith. Next up, Dean, if I can ask you the same, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Dean Fortino. I am from Hewlett Packard Enterprise. We're a global IT company headquartered in Houston, Texas. Personally, I live out of the San Francisco Bay Area and very pleased to participate in today's event.
Excellent. Appreciate you joining us from the West Coast, Dean. Next up, Oren, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Oren Zaslansky. I'm the founder and CEO of Flock Freight. We're a tech company that does algorithmic carpooling of less than truckload and partial truckload freight. So for the manufacturers and shippers out there that have 4 pallets, 8 pallets, 10 pallets, instead of moving through the traditional hub and spoke, we create shared truckloads or multi-stop truckloads. And in doing so, about a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas through our model. Excited to be here and talk about sustainability.
Excellent. That's a lovely background, by the way. Appreciate you joining us today, Oren. And last but not least, Stefan, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Great to be here. Stefan Jacob, one of the founders and COO of Cotopaxi. We're an outdoor gear brand with a deeply ingrained social humanitarian mission based out of Salt Lake City, Utah.
I guess from your perspective, why is it important to place sustainability at the heart of a company's logistics strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it just reinforces the stake that we have, not only as a responsible corporate citizen, but in our communities. And, you know, our associates are part of that community. So it's in line with what Coca-Cola has branded itself as, someone who has made a difference in the community, whether we're talking about social issues or what have you. So it's a top of mind subject, not only from a corporate perspective, but also from an associate perspective. So, and wherever that's the case, that's where we strive to be, to make a difference.
Excellent. I appreciate that perspective. Oren, obviously from your understanding, sustainability is kind of a key part of your organization's kind of value proposition. From your perspective, Why is it important to place sustainability at the heart of a company's logistics strategy?
Yeah, look, I would echo it's the right thing to do. You know, simply stated, we are all, you know, stewards of this planet, and it's the right thing to do. I would add to it, though, that sustainability done well is also more profitable. You know, we see ourselves as a social enterprise, so there is nothing to be shy about. We're trying to build a multi-billion-dollar company into the public markets that provides great shareholder return for our investors, for our employees, and at the same time, we want to save the world. And so, you know, within the global supply chain, there's a lot of waste, not for lack of super hardworking, smart folks and great technology. The reality is it's nearly impossible to be optimal all the time. You know, things are always suboptimal. In our case, if a truck is going down the road and it's only 70% full, you know, currently that may be totally reasonable. I mean, it's of high quality. You know, it's cost effective-ish. But if there's an opportunity to get that truck 80, 85, 90, 95% full, then not only does that mean there's in theory less trucks running around creating less greenhouse gas, but what it also means for the shipper, you know, Coke and HP who ship things, that maybe you only have to pay for the portion of the truck that you use, because we'll find another customer and algorithmically match them together. So in doing so, this is our version, but there are so many out there that say, look, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can be sustainable because it's the right thing to do. And at the same time, maybe we can help you, and many, it's certainly not just Flock Freight, can help you reduce costs. And if we can help you reduce costs, then we're going to help increase your profitability.
Definitely. So I guess to Oren's point, Stefan, just bringing yourself in, it seems like, you know, what you guys are doing, sustainability is kind of the key part of I guess, why you guys were founded. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and I guess why you guys are placing sustainability so kind of intrinsic to your kind of value proposition?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right, Nick. My co-founder and I, we knew that we wanted to find a way as a corporate entity to do good before we even knew how to do well economically, right? And that was driven from our personal experiences, and so we wanted to find a way to sort of build giving and corporate sustainability into everything that we do through our entire value chain, from our product design development over how we then manufacture our products, obviously ship them from A to B, the logistics component, and how we engage with all of our stakeholders. So yes, sustainability is at the very core of who we are as a brand. And I agree with Oren. I think there's Oren, my apologies. I think there's a clear argument to be made that doing good from a sustainability perspective and doing well economically, they're not at odds. I think they can actually be very complementary. And I think the flip side to this is like, why is it important? I think, at least as a consumer brand, such as, Keith, and I think, HP, same thing, the cost of not taking this seriously in logistics and throughout the rest of your supply chain is really high. Consumers have higher and higher expectations to organizations, and will hold them accountable. And we see that ever increasing, even more so in Europe, but also here in the United States. So I think the risk of not taking it seriously is very high from a consumer perception perspective.
Definitely. Dean, bringing yourself in there, just to kind of Stefan's points there around, I guess, the risks. From your perspective, what's the risk of not, placing sustainability at the heart of the strategy moving forward from a HPE perspective?
Yeah, Nick, I think it's almost being negligent and showing a lack of awareness of what's happening today. If you pick up a newspaper and see 100-degree temperatures in Victoria, British Columbia, or snowstorms in Houston, or the recent flooding in Germany and Belgium, you need to make sure that sustainability is at a forefront for your customers and the rest of the client base that you have.
Definitely. Oren, bring yourself in here, I guess, with avoiding, I guess, scaremongering narratives that sometimes are present when it comes to this discussion. For the brands listening to this that maybe not as far progressed as some when it comes to sustainability, what would you say are some of the risks of ignoring sustainability goals?
Yeah, look, I'll echo what Dean just shared. I mean, we just can't simply ignore what's going on. And so doing the right thing is a responsibility for all of us. I think there is real customer risk. There is real partner risk that if you're not, I think there's two ways to think about sustainability, right? Within the firm and outside of your firm. At the very least, I think people need to consider both. You need to think about what you can do. So we're certified B Corp. We're the only certified B Corp within freight. Being a B Corp means we've demonstrated empirically through data our ability to improve sustainability as well as diversity. We're bringing sustainability outside our firm, right? So our manufacturers, who are our customers, can do business with us, save some money, get higher quality, but also achieve sustainability efforts on their front, meaning we can offer them a carbon neutral offset. So there's opportunities for them to say, we're going to partner with people whom can help from a sustainability standpoint outside of our firm. And at the same time, we're going to drive all sorts of initiatives within our firm: recycling, carpooling, procurement processes, materials, all sorts of initiatives to be more sustainable. But if you think about what firms like us and others are doing by offering sustainability certificates, so to speak, carbon offsets, carbon credits, it creates competitive advantage. And so, we flourish because of it, because a potential customer chooses to do business with us versus somebody else. So in our case, it's not a bad thing because we win either way. If competitors of ours, so to speak, crop up, begin to create a similar offering and can offer similar carbon neutrality, might I face competitive pressure? Yes. First of all, you got to be confident enough to say that's okay. We can weather that. But maybe more importantly, that means there's more carbon neutral, initiatives occurring at the larger scale anyways, because our purpose is to try to do our part to save the world. If those other competitive firms don't crop up or don't offer those, then we'll win in that we're creating sustainability through our direct efforts, as well as we'll build a much bigger firm much faster, because there are customers out there that are saying, at the very least, I could partner with a firm that's committed to sustainability. That's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, if it's not only not costing you anything, it's saving you money and you're improving quality, and they can give me a carbon offset, then yes, I want to do that. But again, if competitors come to Rise that can do the same thing, we win because that's part of our mission regardless.
Definitely. So Keith, bringing yourself in here, from your perspective to Oren and Dean's points here, what are the risks moving forward of ignoring, the sustainability issue?
Yeah, I think there's two risks. There's consumer risk that's very real, because unlike has been in the past when companies could sit on the sidelines and that was kind of considered a risk-averse approach to your brand, I think we've moved into an environment in the landscape now where it's very much expected that brands will have a voice in our daily lives, and that's very different than what used to be in the past. So for a brand such as Coca-Cola to sit on the sideline on an issue like sustainability, you run afoul of consumer risk, and that's very real. I mean, at the end of the day, that means potential loss of sales, right? People have choices in terms of who they do business with. On the other end, you run risk with your associates, those who are the human capital within your organization to make that organization go. Within the four walls of our company, there's an expectation that our company will stake out a voice and a position on items like sustainability. So when we don't exercise that voice, then you not only have consumer risk, but you have risk within your walls and those who make up the lifeline, the very bloodline of your company. So those are two very real risks, and that's why we have it in our mission statement for all to see, and we have it in our DNA, so to speak, because that's how much we believe it's important to inside and outside of our walls.
Definitely. So Stefan, just bringing yourself in, just to Keith's points around kind of within the organization and I guess attracting talent because of the sustainability message. Can you talk to, I guess, from a Cotopaxi perspective, how you're maybe attracting talent due to that, I guess, sustainability message that you guys are have in the market?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Keith. I still remember when we first launched the business back in 2014. Nobody had ever heard of Cotopaxi, but we had positioned from the get-go ourselves with our mission, right? Almost like a nonprofit organization. We're obviously a profit-driven nonprofit organization as to what we stand for. And in the first couple of weeks, several of the job postings that we put out there, we received hundreds, literally, and hundreds of applications from students and folks that the message resonated so well with them, and that has held true throughout the years that we've now built the team. This younger millennial generation and even boomers and older generations, people have higher expectations in the organizations that they work for. And it is a true, genuine competitive advantage, both from a talent acquisition and talent retention perspective, to operate according to sustainability principles. We're also certified B Corp, like Oren and Flock Freight. It makes a difference. It creates an accountability for us internally that we can leverage and use not only in our customer communication, but also in our talent acquisition and retention effort. And it's a real, again, there are real dollar sides behind that. Besides the fact that it's the right thing to do, again, there's an economic benefit to having sustainability ingrained into the DNA of the organization from that perspective.
Definitely. So I think a lot of companies that I speak to see sustainability as expensive and as something that maybe they can't do from kind of a cost perspective with everything that's going on. Just moving on to the next point on some kind of tangible steps. Obviously, sustainability can be a bit daunting because it's such a broad issue and encompasses so many different facets of an organization. Starting off with Dean, for an organization that's listening to this, that's maybe earlier on in the process, what advice would you give them as they're starting out, say, that carbon neutrality journey, or at least reducing the emissions throughout their transportation network specifically?
I would suggest starting slow, taking small steps, looking for little wins. First and foremost, I would say goal setting would have to be a priority. So setting science-based targets that are in alignment with the Paris Accord. This is going to allow companies that are driving towards sustainability to measure their progress over time. So I would say that would probably be a very critical, important first step.
Definitely. Oren, bringing yourself in here, same question to you to get your perspective. Just for companies at literally the start of the journey when it comes to sustainability, what advice would you give them as they're starting out what seems to be kind of a daunting task?
Yeah, my answer might be a little bit unexpected. We've had these conversations many internally when we filed for B Corp. So Stephen's been through it. It's real. I mean, it's a hardcore process, and that's, are we real about this? Are we sincere? I think this is not the kind of initiative to pay lip service to. Once again, it just won't be effective. I mean, you won't help solve this larger problem. But maybe more importantly, if I think through the eyes of like a manager and a CEO and a leader within a firm, if it's rhetoric, it doesn't work. So I think you just want to ask yourself, why do I want to do this? And there's a lot of good reasons to do it. I want to do it because I want to do my part. I want to do it because I think it can make my business more profitable. I want to do it because I think it's a great way to recruit and differentiate on the world-class talent front. There's a lot of, and many other reasons to do it. And I think all those reasons are fine. It's kind of like philanthropy. Why do you give? Some people give because the right thing to do. Some people give to put their name on the building. Either way, giving is good, right? So whatever your reasons are for embarking on the journey of sustainability as part of your firm, as part of your ethos, I think it's important to just be honest with yourself as to why you want to do it. And all reasons I think are fine, but have that conversation, because that really help instruct and inform the roadmap that you build out for sustainability, and whether it's within your firm or outside your firm, and how you want to go about it.
Definitely. So I think the point there is around the credibility of the messaging rather than it just being, lip service. Stefan, just from your perspective, obviously, as we mentioned before, Cotopaxi was founded with sustainability right at the center of, the mission statement. But for the brands that maybe have been around for a little bit longer than you guys, what advice would you give them as they start out their sustainability journey?
Yeah. I think Oren made a great point. I think being really honest with yourself as a starting point. Why are you doing this, right? What are you trying to accomplish? And what's the core motivation internally? And I think instead of this just being a small initiative that is driven by either the marketing department to have like a great CSR story, or by maybe the HR department, I think having a broad flow through the organization to sort of gather that feedback from the organizations to make sure that it is real, right? That it is felt throughout, the executive team and, all hierarchies as to why are we doing this? How is this on brand for who we are, especially if you've been around for a while? And how does it genuinely fit into our strategy and our brand identity or corporate identity? So I think that initial self-assessment is important. Secondly, you don't need to go this alone. There are amazing organizations that will help you with that, right? We mentioned B Corp. There is, in our case, we're part of the Sustainable Apparel Alliance. There is ethical trading initiatives. There's all kinds of industry-specific organizations and bodies that will help you, coach you through that process to take a step towards sustainability. And then I think the first step is, which was mentioned, is to do that assessment. What's the status quo, to start measuring how are we actually doing, right? In our case, we went fully carbon neutral this year, but the first step for that was to say, okay, let's measure where are we actually emitting, what are the biggest contributors to our footprint? And not surprisingly, in our case, it was actually materials and manufacturing made up close to 80% of our total output happened even before we had sold a single product. It was just happening at tier 1, tier 2 facilities in our production process, and then about 7% transportation, and then 12% overhead. So get clear on that, create a good assessment of what the contributors are, and then figure out a sort of catalog of measures of initiatives to address them and improve them. Swap out your forwarder with Flock Freight and things like that.
Definitely. I think that's some very sound advice there. Keith, same question to you. Obviously, it's pretty hard for an organization that's been around, say, for as long as Coca-Cola is, to just bolt on sustainability, right? Given, how long you guys have been around. What advice would you give to similar brands that obviously have been around and are as huge as you guys are as they're starting out their sustainability journey?
Yeah, so you're right. Given our long tenure as a corporate citizen, sometimes it does become more daunting. So that's why it's essential that you have the executive buy-in, right? It starts at the top, filters down, and cascades down to your senior leadership. And at Coke, that's exactly what we have. In fact, again, we've staked out a position with our vision statement. So everything you see about Coke, we're talking about sustainability. So it's very clear. But how do you move beyond that, right? How do you make sustainability a living organism within the organization? You know, some of the things I would say is you got to make it part of all your conversations. When you're talking to that supplier, are y'all talking about sustainability? Is that someone who is as passionate about sustainability as you are? That may inform the relationship. Are you talking about it in projects? When you're initiating projects, are y'all talking about, hey, how does this impact sustainability? So you have to make it a living organism within your company. So it's just not a vision statement. The other thing, and I heard Stefan talk about, is just clarity. Really getting clarity on what your mission is, what you're trying to do. I heard Oren talk about it certainly can be profitable from a cost standpoint, but it can also be costly. So when you start talking about some of the new technologies, electric cars, what have you, and understand those things and get clarity on those things, that's very important. More importantly, measure. Make sure that you are measuring. You know, we all know what you measure, you get better at, you improve upon. So the sooner you can establish those measurements and put them in a scorecard, and you start to hold people accountable to those things, the better, the more improvement that you're going to drive there. And the last thing I would say, get engaged. You know, Stefan said it well. You don't have to go it alone. You know, become part of these alliances. Find out, get involved with some of the partnerships on autonomous vehicles and some of those things, so you can get some of those early learnings, and you can help influence some of the decisions that are being made around innovation. So get engaged.
Definitely, that's some very, very good advice there. Dean, just bringing yourself in there, obviously your role, you have sustainability in your job title. See, Keith mentioned there kind of making sustainability a living organism throughout the organization, something that's, you know, intrinsic to the organization. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and I guess the influence potentially that you have with your role on other stakeholders within the organization to help that sustainability message?
Yes, so I'm accountable to the supply chain organization, but I also have accountability to the corporate sustainability group as well. So where I have ability to influence is in discussions with our logistics service providers. You know, an example is Flock Freight on the phone, and also being able to participate in discussions with customers and carrying that messaging back into the organization, evaluating what options that we can carry forward, doing analysis on the cost benefits and the trade-offs involved in making those recommendations to management.
Excellent. Thanks for that perspective. Moving on to, I guess, the next point that's been mentioned a little early in the conversation around, I guess, the underutilization maybe of transportation networks, the prevalence of empty miles, and how to, I guess, tangibly increase capacity utilization. Oren, just from your perspective, can you talk a little bit more to that on kind of the inefficiencies within supply chain transportation networks, the impact that has on, I guess, the carbon footprint, and some ways to, I guess, reduce those impacts?
Yeah, obviously Flock Freight has a pretty strong point of view on this one. I think there's many ways of attacking this. Some that have nothing to do with Flock, electrification of vehicles, you know, that Keith mentioned earlier. That's very real. That's happening. There are many players working on that. I don't think it's enough, but it's a lot. It's going to take time. And to Keith's point, there's a pretty significant capex, you know, front investment that then gets measured, you know, as an ROI over time. And there are large enterprise class providers like an HP and a Coca-Cola that can make that work. But the vast majority of shippers out there in GDP, right, is in the hands of SMBs that are simply not going to be able, you know, let's say in the next decade or two, to make the level of front end investment in order to return. So that being said, you know, our point of view on this is the wasted space on board the trucks that are already running around. I guess I would say we'd have two. One is that trucks aren't full. Let's get them full. That is a win-win-win. The shipper wins because they only pay for the portion of the truck that they use. The carriers, the truckers win because in theory they can increase revenue on board and be more profitable and let me tell you about an underserved community within the supply chain. It is the truck driver. And then lastly, of course, the environment wins. The larger sustainability consumer wins in that there are less miles being driven if a fixed amount of freight, so to speak, can move on less trucks. The other end of the spectrum is all form of optimization within routing. Flock freight attacks the very core of the hub and spoke, where trucks are going in and out of terminals all day and kind of running around town. Trucks are both not completely full, and also kind of going back and forth, and instead saying, gee, there's a world in which we can just put things with things, get trucks full, and have these smoother routes where it kind of flows down the river. So, between, I think, at the intersection of let's make sure trucks are full. It's such a simple concept, right? I mean, I've yet to hear anybody say to me, no, I think it's better to have trucks not full. It's really just hard to do. And if we all accept that things are hard, and that's okay, and better yet, there's significant economic opportunity in solving hard problems, right? It's very defensible when you solve a hard problem. And then secondly, let's be as efficient and as optimal as we can. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. We all know this to be truth. Again, nobody's combating that. It's just hard to get it done. This is something that certainly we feel strongly about. And the good news, and I promise I'll pause here, is that these are services now. We've made this a service that's accessible to anyone. That an SMB customer that is shipping 5 pallets of something or 20 pallets of something can simply buy this as a service. It's like sustainability as a service. I mean, we'll recoin what SaaS means. Sustainability as a service, whereby they can buy it for a $300 transaction. That they were going to pay $300 to that person, pay $300 to this person who can give you a sustainable solution without any front-end investment. Electric vehicles, fantastic, big investment. There is an ROI there. Major enterprise players will do this. They will lead the way on this. 20 years from now, the SMBs will. But today, SMBs can buy in on this sustainability as a service.
Definitely appreciate that perspective. Obviously, the data is very interesting, and the impact that that's slowly having throughout the market is it brings a lot of hope to folks like myself. Keith, just from your perspective, obviously there's a few different modes that folks use to transport their goods around the world, right? Especially given how large Coca-Cola is as an organization. Can you talk about that, just specifically on the different kinds of modes that you guys can use that can help reduce that carbon footprint?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go there, one thing I would say is that you definitely need to invest in digitizing your supply chain. You need to be able to see it real time, right? So that enables a lot of decisions that you could make in terms around optimization. But yeah, we've gone through out of necessity because of what's going on with the capacity, but also just in terms of sustainability, where we're starting to develop multimodal strategies. Down in Mexico, Monterrey, for instance, where we were doing 100% OTR crossing the border. Now we're moving things out of Monterrey through ocean, through intermodal, and through OTR. So we're starting to deploy those multimodal strategies that not only make sense from a sustainability standpoint, because you're cutting into that carbon emission footprint, but it makes difference in a cost. It's driving down cost, because now we're not overburdened one portion of the sector with capacity demands. And that we all know that there's a driver shortage with OTR. So by being able to leverage intermodal and also ocean movements have played itself well in that regard. So collaboration is another area that I would point out. And I think Oren's talked about that. He's provided an environment where you can collaborate with many different customers to fill trucks. Again, that's a win-win. That's a win not only for the environment, but it's also a win for your pocketbook, right? So developing that type of collaboration, we're doing that with our internal customers. We have a strong bottling network, so we're learning how to collaborate amongst ourselves and also outside of the walls with other companies who may be going in the same direction, same origin destination, and we need to fill a truck. So those type of things, I think, lend themselves well to this effort.
Excellent. Appreciate that perspective, Keith. Stefan, bringing yourself in there, just to kind of Keith's point specifically on the intermodal aspect of things. I know you and I have discussed, I guess, where you guys source your products and the impact that has on transportation. Can you just talk about that from an intermodal perspective and the impact that then has on the planet ultimately, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so most of our production is in Asia, Philippines, Cambodia, China, etc. not so much even from a cost perspective, but the very best insulated outerwear manufacturers are in Asia. They're not here in the United States anymore. And so that's where our product comes from. Obviously getting it to our, key consumer markets, which is, Central Europe, Western Europe, and the United States at this point, as well as Japan and Australia, etc. We historically relied heavily on ocean. Is by far, from a sustainability and from a cost perspective, the best mode of transportation. The ocean environment, as many of the listeners will know, is absolutely bonkers right now, both in terms of the availability of container space in the origin locations, port congestion. I mean, it's just crazy right now, and just the outpacing of the demand for ocean capacity versus the available supply. Despite steamship lines doing their very best, right, in terms of providing capacity, they're not like holding back, but it's simply a reality. And so we, in order to meet obligations, had to shift this season very significantly into air, which from a sustainability perspective is a huge issue, right? Bringing the same, item, ocean versus air, the carbon footprint is tremendously worse by going air, right? So it's a real challenge from that perspective, and puts more pressure on the offset efforts. We offset 100% of our transportation, but it's obviously more costly and requires higher offset requirements from that perspective. And then once it hits port, we do both truck and rail, depending again on efficiency and sustainability considerations. And so it is a tricky business, right? Balancing your deliverability requirements with the sustainability goals. You can have a plan, and obviously that's what you start out with, but then that often meets the reality of obligations to customers and clients, and constantly balancing and calibrating that is a real challenge. We're not gonna lie about that.
Definitely appreciate that perspective, Stefan. Dean, obviously this is something that you and I have spoken about before, is the different kind of modes that can be used. And obviously to Stefan's point there around, the differences between air and say ocean, what's your perspective on this, and how are you guys at HPE tackling this challenge?
Yes, so a major contributor of our reduction in emissions was converting from air to ocean. One of our business units had a goal of 60% plus conversion rate, and we were well on track. And then the pandemic hit, and we had to shift to air a lot more and do a lot more moving between our factories to build product. I would suggest to the audience to look at alternative modes. Right now, we're looking at rail. Rail's a potential alternative to ocean, and looking at other types of alternatives that may, because as Stefan mentioned, the ocean industry is somewhat in turmoil right now in terms of the container shortage and port congestions.
Excellent. Appreciate that perspective, Dean. Moving on to the next topic around network optimization. Keith, obviously, I think you alluded to this briefly earlier in one of your answers. From, I guess, Coca-Cola's perspective, can you talk about, that network optimization piece, and I guess how companies can reduce their carbon footprint in that realm of transportation?
Yeah, so, typically when you talk about optimizing, there's algorithms that are developed around that with certain factors that you're trying to optimize. So one thing I would suggest is that as part of that algorithm, as part of that optimization, that you do put a sustainability factor in there. That could influence how you design your warehouse network, which is a strong influencer on transportation. It could influence where you put it in terms of being able to access waterways and intermodal rail lines. So as we broaden our thinking and build our brain around sustainability, we need to bring and help inform some of those optimization exercises, because that's not been a natural reflex, right? When you think about optimizing, you don't think about a factor for sustainability or carbon emissions. So, but we have to start building those things into our optimization equations now. Just to make sure that we have a holistic and environmentally friendly solutions that come back, at least understand what those impacts are.
Definitely. Stefan, just bringing yourself in there, and just to Keith's points there, can you, I guess, talk about, how you're building this and how you guys already have this from, I guess, a last mile inbound and outbound perspective?
Yeah, so I think there's on the inbound side, right? I think selecting production and manufacturing locations requires the exact same consideration that Keith mentioned. Then on the outbound side, right, from a distribution perspective. So sourcing from a partner in South America, for example, for, let's say in our case, our fleece jackets, will have a much more positive, from a sustainability perspective, footprint in terms of getting the cargo from El Salvador to Salt Lake City versus getting it from Cambodia to Salt Lake City, right? So it is absolutely a consideration. It's faster, it's shorter lead times, and it has a better sustainability footprint. So we take that into consideration as we make selection for where we source our products from. And then exactly on the outbound, the last mile piece, given the demand structure, yes, there's, that's essentially math, right? To basically tell you, where you're going to ship your cargo. That's where, from a both time to customer, cost efficiency, and hence sustainability perspective, you should place your distribution hubs.
Definitely. There's some very interesting perspectives there. I think a lot of people can take, some really tangible insights there to their day-to-day practices. Oren, just bring yourself in there from your perspective on the network optimization piece. What should folks be, considering as they're building that out or refining what they already have?
Well, as Dean was mentioning earlier, the shift from air to ocean is a fantastic one. And what Dean didn't share, but I know that he knows, is that it's also far less expensive. Far less expensive. I mean, I'm going to make up a number and say 1/20th, 1/30th of the cost. I mean, we're talking pennies on the dollar. So what do you give though in ocean is it's a slower mode, right? I mean, 3 weeks from Asia to the West Coast, for sure, air gets there overnight. So then this becomes, to Keith's previous point about the data, right? About having a lot of rigor and data and process in place where you can see upstream in the supply chain, and ideally, easy for me to say, get ahead of it, right? Understand from the analytics perspective what demand is going to look like, and how to move things in a more optimal way, far more sustainable, far less expensive, drop straight to the bottom line of the enterprise user. And we call that a change of mode, changing from the mode of air to the mode of ocean. We feel, obviously, again, have a strong point of view on a mode that we do called shared truckload, right? That you should share that truck and get it completely full. One of the challenges we run into, and we surmount it obviously every day, but I want to inspire, enterprise shippers out there, is that common feedback we hear is, well, we have less than truckload on our RFQ and we have truckload on the RFQ. And if it gets to about a half a truck or more, we just buy truckload. And we would say, well, that's not very sustainable, nor is it very cost effective. Like, if you're going to buy a half a truck, we'd like to sell you half a truck and we can put other freight to go with it. And a common pushback point is, totally makes sense. We love it. We want to do it. We don't have a column on our RFQ. So sorry. And I'm thinking, well, surely this cannot be the point of pushback here. This deal does not die on the vine because there's a lack of a column on a spreadsheet. Now, I'm being a little cavalier because for the large enterprise shipper, it's complicated. Like they have data contextualized in certain ways. So this goes back to, why do you want to drive sustainability issues? And trying to speak to the audience and say, if this really matters to you, then you're going to have to invest a little bit in your own internal, within your firm, process, people, and procedure to change the way you do business modestly, to change the way you procure, so that you can change that mode. And you unlock value in two ways. One is you unlock value from a sustainability standpoint. You get trucks full instead of half full, because that's clearly very, very wasteful. And secondarily, just as in the shift from air to ocean, you save a ton of dough. Not 1/20th, the way you do from air to ocean. That's an extraordinary example of value creation. I mean, Dean, congratulations. That's an extraordinary example of value creation. Typically within domestic over-the-road transportation of freight, if you could cut your truckload cost by 10, 20%, that's seen as being transformative. Transformative savings. But, you have to work with your partners, whether it's Flock or somebody else, and say, okay, look, this is going to give us the same quality. It's going to give us much greater sustainability, carbon neutral offsets, lower cost, make us more profitable. We love that. We got to put a column on the spreadsheet. We're going to figure that out. We're going to have to change our internal reporting structure, our internal analytics. I think it's a modest investment that all of us have to make in order to partner for ultimately what are more profitable and more sustainable solutions.
Definitely. Bring yourself in, Keith, to this conversation around what you mentioned earlier around the digitalization piece and the data.
So Oren triggered something for me that I want to make sure I point out, because we're talking about logistics optimization. I know we have a focus on transportation, but we can't lose sight of some of those influencing parts of the business, and which is the demand signal, right? So it is really worth it to invest in getting a good demand signal, because based on the accuracy of that, that could inform what type of mode you use. If you got a good demand signal and you're not doing things last minute, then certainly you have more options and more flexibility to choose modes. But if you have a bad demand signal, you're probably going to end up on the spot market, where you have to pay a lot of money just to move product, just because your demand signal places you in those type of situation. So my advice would be not to lose sight on the importance of some of the second tier parts of the supply chain, like the demand signal, because they do drive a lot of cost based on accuracy in the transportation space, which ultimately impacts sustainability.
Definitely. I think that speaks to, I guess, the importance of a more holistic supply chain conversation, rather than just seeing everything as a silo, right? Is that the demand planning aspect, and how, you need to plan to execute the supply chain ultimately. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that, Keith, just about, how you see supply chain end to end, rather than just being, I'm the transportation guy or you're the demand planning guy?
Yeah. So, number one, if you have that end-to-end visibility, then that's going to lend itself to you being able to take out volatility. And it's when volatility is introduced a lot of times, when not only cost is introduced, but we don't have a lot of options. Top of mind for me, we're in a situation, just because of the market dynamics, where we've had to air freight items from China to the US. So obviously that's not environmental friendly, but it's what the business had to do to sustain and take care of our consumers. So having that end-to-end supply chain harmonized, working well, really does play itself into sustainability space, in terms of being able to be robust and flexible in terms of mode selection. And that's where a lot of times you're in a position where you may have to pick something such as an air freight that is not environmental friendly, when that end-to-end visibility and optimization is not taking place.
Definitely. Dean, I'd love to hear your perspective on, I guess, what Keith just mentioned around that end-to-end conversation from a supply chain perspective.
Oh, yeah. So where you source your material, whether it be locally or internationally, and then looking at your warehouse footprint and nodes where your distribution centers are placed, that addresses, Nick, what you had referred earlier to the empty miles. So wherever you can consolidate and look at your customer density and place your nodes or warehouses close to your customer base, you'll reduce that empty miles and optimize your network.
Definitely. We're coming up towards the end of the time here, but I just wanted to make sure that we spoke about the electric vehicle piece of the conversation, which is something that a lot of folks are very, very interested in. Oren, I'd love to hear, just kicking off with you on this, your perspective on, I guess, the electric vehicle roadmap. How do you see that playing out from a sustainability perspective?
Sure. Yeah, we spoke about it a little bit earlier. Look, in the short term, they're expensive. If you just look at the EVs in the hands of consumers, automobiles, the initial EVs deployed were to actually a pretty affluent customer who did this because they wanted to do this. It was something they were passionate about from a sustainability perspective, but you gave up a lot of capability, range, of course, being most important, and certainly, let's just say, options. That you had a couple options in the market. It wasn't like going out to buy an ICE where there's just an infinite number of options. In the transportation world, it will start the same way. Range is going to be the primary limitation. So I think what a lot of consumers miss, unfortunately, is they talk about a 500-mile electric tractor, Class A tractor, and EV, and that sounds like awfully good mileage, because as a consumer, we largely don't have access to 500-mile EV cars. Teslas aren't yet driving that far. Unfortunately, though, in domestic transportation here in the US, 500 miles is a part of the solution. Certainly that last mile piece, that first mile piece, that's significant. But in a lot of the work that most shippers need, things are still moving, great distances, thousands of miles, 2,000 miles, 3,000 miles. And in that case, an EV lacks a level of practicality. Now, that being the case, Moore's law suggests that these technologies are going to get more and more efficient over time. They're going to have greater and greater capability. Price will come down. So I think it's really important, easy for me to say, but that the big guys, the big Fortune 50, the Fortune 100, the Fortune 500 behemoths are willing and able to lead on this and make this significant CapEx investment. They can pencil. We see this in the airlines all the time. They can put winglets on an airplane. It costs a fortune to do it. It only saves them 2.5%, 3%. You wonder why they do it. They fly a lot. And they can calculate an ROI that says, well, within 2 years, these things paid for themselves, and then we're in the money. We're ahead on this. I think the Fortune 500 can do the same thing with electric vehicles and say, look, we have these sustainability initiatives. Maybe at first, we're not going to save a ton of money on these. Maybe we can break even, and we can break even in 2-3 years, and that works on our balance sheet, and that works. By the way, again, back to kind of the social enterprise, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think there's everything right with saying, and it works for our brand. That we are proud to have a brand associated with a fantastic product of high quality and low cost, and we're sustainable and we're committed, and we can point to something in particular, and we can point to an EV and say, we're proud to put our brand all over this thing and have it roll into town and to your local grocery store or distribution outlet, and clearly be associated with your brand and sustainability. I think is a really positive thing, knowing that it's an investment and that over time, it will become cost effective. My sense of somebody who's kind of in the industry, and I have the opportunity to talk to whether it's an investor or another founder about what's going on in the world of EVs, happening for sure, when not if. Once it's economically viable for the masses, for the mass shipper community, I think it's still a ways out there. It's still a ways out there, but it is an opportunity to invest now and start making a difference and lead on this initiative.
Definitely. Keith, I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier around kind of the pilot projects. I'd love for you to delve a little bit deeper into that from a Coca-Cola perspective, what you see from an EV perspective.
Yeah, I think Oren kind of hit on it. He spoke to some of the challenges. And for us, in addition to the range, it will also be the weight, right? Because our product tends to be weighty, which is a challenge for electrical vehicle. Also, as he was saying, the infrastructure is not mature enough now where there's the economy of scale. So what I would say to the audience is you really got to think through user application, right? There are some user applications typically within your network where it makes sense. And it may even make sense economically. But right now where electric vehicles stands is most of the value is outside of the P&L. It is positioning your brand to be a better citizen and a better corporate citizen in terms of living up to its values. But again, that takes you outside of your P&L, right? But so we do it. We've invested in it where it makes sense. You talk about material handling equipment, short range moves that may be light in weight, good applications, but really needs to be a lot of thought in terms of user application. We're also starting to look at hydrogen. That's something that's taken off over in Europe, and we're participating there, learning more, and that kind of lends itself better to some of the things we do, our product mix, but we're starting to move into that space as well.
Excellent. Dean, just to kind of, I guess, the Oren and Keith mentioned there a lot of maybe barriers to the EVs. From your perspective, what are maybe some of the bridging projects that folks can do while we're waiting for the EV uptake?
Yeah, Keith just mentioned it, the hydrogen, but we're looking at natural gas alternatives, liquefied natural gas as a potential bridge to get us to electrification. It's just awaiting some of the challenges such as the infrastructure and the range challenges, because it will work in urban areas and where you have access to those capabilities, but going through the Rockies might be a challenge, right, with access.
Definitely appreciate that perspective, Dean. Before I ask everyone to wrap up, just like to ask Stefan, you mentioned earlier around the alliances that you guys are involved in. You mentioned obviously B Corp. I'd like for you to explain to the audience. Obviously, the sustainability issue is fast-paced, is changing a lot with everything that's going on. From your perspective, how do you keep up to date with the changing landscape of sustainability and all the issues associated with that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, part of it is participating in conversations like these, right, with other thought leaders, with other folks who are in this space and are leading and are driving change. We also invested early in our internal leadership as an organization. Our first very senior hire was a chief impact officer, and instead of even before we built out a marketing team and other functions, we felt strongly, especially since that's not natively our background, right, is in the corporate responsibility, corporate philanthropy, sustainability space. That's not what we have as a founding team had tremendous background in. We had the desire to do things the right way and to build an organization and our entire value chain the right way, but we didn't necessarily have that knowledge, right? So we invested early in bringing in talent to help us build these programs and drive, right? And then you'd mentioned, the various partner organizations where we stay really, really close with them in a dialogue. We contribute to those communities and receive a lot back in terms of learnings, right? Other B Corps, other, organizations that are, part of Higg Index, part of Sustainable Apparel Alliance and others. And so I think it's a give and take. As with any community that you engage with, you get out what you put in. And so we try to be really involved as a corporate citizen in these respective communities, listen and learn very carefully, listen to our customers at the same time, and just constantly force ourselves to evolve as opposed to accepting the status quo.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Some tangible advice for the audience. Keith, maybe same question to you on the changing landscape and how you personally keep up to date with all the changes and evolutions around sustainability.
Yeah, one is just, again, making it a living organization within your four walls, right? So you're talking about it. It's part of the conversation. It's part of the expectation for you to participate. So, that in itself drives participation and engagement. Outside of that, I would encourage involvement with certain alliances. We'll probably join an organization called Clean Cargo. That is about 70 organizations like-minded that are doing things with ocean freight to try to be more sustainable. So joining those type of alliances, which we've had several partnerships like that. Get engaged, be a voice, use the voice, use your influence, educate. Not only education within the wall, but education outside of the wall by benchmarking with those companies who are doing it well. And bring those best practices back to your four walls and activate them. So doing those type of things, it stays forefront or top of mind with each and every one of our associates and as our organization as a whole.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Keith. As we wrap up today and bring the conversation to a close, I'd like to go around the virtual room and ask everybody, in light of the conversation today, what excites you about the future of logistics from a sustainability perspective? So starting off with Dean with that question.
Yeah, I think we live in an era where it's where's my stuff, right? So customers want it faster. They want to have it predictive, so that they have a delivery date, and if it can be delivered in a cleaner mode, that's all the better. So what excites me is being involved and collaborating on projects that touch on any of those areas. HPE's kicked off a Logistics Sustainability Partner of the Year award, where we're driving recognition for those providers that bring those type of projects to us, and that we can work on together.
Excellent. Appreciate that perspective, Dean. Same question to you, Keith. In light of today's conversation, what excites you about the future of logistics from a sustainability perspective? Yeah,
there's a lot that excites me. I mean, when you look at the backdrop of Coca-Cola being over 120 plus years, just figuring it out. This is one more thing that we will look back 100 years from now, and no doubt we will figure it out. But it's one of those subjects that warrants figuring it out, right? The other thing that excites me about it is as I see companies like Flock Freight, which I think is very disruptive. This is the type of innovation that we're starting to see. And a lot of that's driven by how do we solve this problem of sustainability? So you're seeing a higher level of disruption and innovation. And those things are exciting because you get a Flock Freight, that is introduced. And that speaks to a higher level of collaboration. We're starting to see the walls fall down between corporate entities where we're in the vein of trying to figure it out, we're learning how to work together to figure it out. How do we collaborate and seize on those synergies outside of our four walls to make our world better? So that in itself is exciting. And that's why, when I think about sustainability, I just get excited all over again.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Keith. Same question to you, Stefan. What excites you about the future of logistics, especially from a sustainability perspective?
Yeah, I think that the fact, this panel, I think, is a perfect example, right? That the fact that there's public commitment from large enterprise level organizations to figure this out, as Keith said, right? That this is part of the goal set, right? That these organizations are aiming towards and are managing towards, I think, it will make a major difference, right, from a sustainability perspective, and that's really exciting to see. Especially in combination, and Oren, you made that point, that some of the technology that's being developed is such that it doesn't take these massive upfront investment by the individual SME, shipper, right? It's this the notion that you can be a small organization and yet you can optimize your supply chain by taking advantage of some of these sustainability as a service, as you called it, offerings from organizations and providers that have figured this out. And so I think the large organizations are doing this, the smaller also have access to do this. I think that gives me a lot of hope that we'll see a lot of positive change on that front in the coming years.
Excellent. Appreciate that positive answer. And Oren, quickly from you before we wrap up today, what excites you about the future of logistics from a sustainability perspective?
I'd say two things. One is, having been in the freight industry for 25 years, 20 years ago, sadly, this was mostly rhetoric. I heard many people talk about, at the time, recycling issues. We could offer them that solution, and it wasn't cost effective. And so it was a lot of like, well, we asked, we can mark the box that we're sustainable because we tried, yet we're not actually going to deliver. This is clearly not the case. You have titans like HP and Coca-Cola here saying that sustainability matters. They've resourced to it. They're managing to it. They're leading globally on that front. So that is incredibly inspiring. The other front, I would say, is we really have arrived at the sort of ubiquitous confluence of technologies and service offerings coming together. We can now use electric vehicles soon, maybe not so soon, but in the coming years, autonomous electric vehicles, doing routing optimizations, deploying shared truckloads, making sure things are full. And it's the way, and with visibility across the supply chain, demand signal, to Keith's point, the ability to see these things, to be able to plug into one another, our respective small, medium, and large firms' abilities to plug in digitally to one another, to speak that digital universal language, and to bring solutions together that are greater than the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, is extraordinary right now. It's really, really happening with intention, the likes of which we haven't seen before.
Appreciate that. Well, this was a very, very positive conversation. I'd love to get you guys back in, say, 5 years' time and see where we're at and what we've developed over those years. First and foremost, really appreciate the panelists and taking time from their busy days and busy schedules to join us today. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope to get you guys along for another one really, really soon.